Welcome viewers to today's Node.js tutorial. Today we're going to be covering all the basics, everything you need to know about Node.js to start writing your own backends, do your own servers. We're going to be looking at RESTful protocol for RESTful APIs, all that good information, and it's going to be super quick and concise, no experience required. Without further ado, let's dive into it. So, for this, you'll need Node.js installed. It's pretty straightforward. You can check out their website and just follow their download instructions. I'd recommend getting the latest version. And once you've done that, we're going to come into our terminal and cd into a project folder. So I'm going to go into one called tutorials, and I'm going to go make a directory called, let's call it Node Express tutorial. And so now we're just going to cd into Node Express tutorial. And in here is where the magic is going to happen. So the first thing we're going to do is write npm node package manager init-y, and that's going to create us a file called package.json, and that is the basis of the magic. After that, what we're going to do is install the packages that we're going to need. So we're going to go npm install, or just npm I, and for today we only need Express as a package. We'll let that install, and we're going to have a developer dependency, so we're going to go --save dev, and we're going to have nodemon there. And so now that they're all installed, we're going to make two files that we'll need for today's tutorial. The first one is going to be a server.js, and the second one is going to be one called test.rest. And the last thing we're going to do is type code period, which is going to open up our Visual Studio Code, and we can start making our backend. So if I just make that pretty full screen, we're going to start off by coming into our package.json. And the first thing we have to do in here is make a div. You can call it div or start. And we're just going to write nodemon server.js. And that just means that when we run npm run div, it's going to run this, and nodemon is going to init server.js. And nodemon basically just restarts our server every time we make a change to any file. And it just saves us from having to restart our server continuously. So now that's done, we're going to come into our server, and we're going to just initialize a server. And for that, we have to require the packages that we've just installed. So we're going to use Express. Express is absolutely amazing. It's a pretty lightweight server, and for that, you just go require Express. The second thing you have to do is create your application, and so we do that by calling Express as a function. Next, we define our port. That's equal to, in this I'm going to go 9393. And then the next thing we do is go app.listen, pass it our port, and give it a function to call on server start. And so in here I'm just going to go server started on port and pass it the port. Excellent. And so that is literally enough to init a server on your local host. And so if we come into terminal and write npm run dev, you'll see that our server has started on port 9393. And that is super cool. And you might be thinking, now what does that even mean? And so just a quick intro into how this whole thing works. A server is like the backbone of the internet, and from your computer there's like a communication between a server and your computer, and that's in the form of requests and responses. So essentially you send requests, the app listens, that's why it's app.listen, to a request, and it responds with a response according to the parameters that we pass it in the request. And that is where the REST principles come in, because they kind of define the different types of requests that we can make. And this is why we have our test.rest file, because this is where we're going to make these requests from to communicate with our server that we've just defined here. And for this to work, you're going to need a VS Code extension known as REST client. And so if you just install that, this test.rest file will work its magic, and you won't have to touch anything like Postman, which is great, but this is just infinitely simpler. And so we're just going to come in here and make a get to http://localhost 9393. And that's literally it. We can call that, and you'll notice we get nothing back, and that's because we don't have any routes. So, what is a route? We now have our server. People can make requests to our server. A route is basically the local directions to navigate through our server. And so in here, the first route we're going to use using that REST method get is a home route. And this takes a function with a request and a response. And in here, we can read the request or do stuff with the request. But in this particular case with a get request, there's often just that is the request, and we can just respond by saying res.status 200 for a successful request .send, and we can literally just send back hi. And so now there's a route. Someone requests to our server, it navigates to this direction, and if we send that back, we get back hi. Super simple, super excellent. And this is literally the foundation of the internet. Every time you access a website, you go to their URL, you request to their URL, the domain is the server, and you request the HTML. They send the HTML back and the web page loads in front of you. Although you can send a whole lot of stuff, as we've just seen, I can send hi. I can also send an object with message and say hi, and so now if we call this and restart our server, we get a message hi. So get is the first kind of method. There's a bunch of them. The main ones are app.post. Let's just say we post rec res. Open up a function, same stuff, different day. And I'm just going to make 4 different routes. This one is put, and this one is delete. And these are your primary REST methods, RESTful methods. And you can use a lot of them interchangeably, but it's a lot more clear if you use them separately. And the added benefit is that if you have them at the same direction, the same address, it's like going to a different department within that address. So if you .get at one particular URL, one particular route, you'll get back a message hi. And if we res.status.send at a post, we can send a message, where is your package? And so in this particular case, if we come back into our test.res, 3 hashes to initialize a new request and go post to the same address, say that in request, we get something back because I forgot to add the status for 200. I have to send a status, successful status. And request that, we get where is your package. Now, I've done that specifically because a get is simply asking for information. You don't really provide anything except for what comes in the URL. And so in this URL, you can have parameters. So for example, James would be a parameter. And then if you put a question mark, you can have a query, which would be like limit is equal to 10. So 10 would be equivalent to the limit, which is the query, and James would be the parameter which you can access. Post requests have a little bit more substance to them, so we'll get to that stuff in a second. Post requests take some content, and so just down here you define content type application JSON, and you can actually send JSON. So in this particular case, I could send friend is equal to James. James is a friend. And over here, to read the JSON, we have to add what they call middleware. And so middleware is basically just like a bit of an, I guess you could think of it as an interception. So we just go app.use express.json, and it just tells us that we should expect JSON essentially. And so in here, we can destructure this out of what is known as the body, as opposed to a query or a parameter. We can go const friend is equal to request.body. So inside request.body is this package that we're sending with this JSON with friend. And so in this case, if we just say even better, your friend is called James, and I'll just change these to backticks. And so now if I make this with this body and send that request, and so now if I just make this with this body and send this request, this should be friend. And so now if I just restart my server and send it with this body, we can send that it reads our request and it responds with the appropriate name. So if I change this to like Doug and send that, our friend is called Doug. And that's how you send a post package. You literally post a package with some information to that particular URL. So that's the second kind of request. The third kind of request we'll get to in a second, because now we're going to get experimental with just these first two routes. So the first thing I'm going to do here is just put in a guard clause and say if there's no friend, then I want to return res.status. We're going to say 400, which is a failure on your behalf. And we're going to say send message, please include friend name. And so basically what this is going to do is just say, okay, if we don't send a friend, so let's say we have friends, for example, something different, and we send that request, we get a message just saying, okay, please include friend. Once again, that's a nice little guard clause to make sure that they send the right thing. Awesome. So that's kind of how post works. We've added just a piece of information to our body. You can also add headers. So headers are just like for authentication and stuff like that. So you could, just down here, go authorization and then type token and have a token address if you need a password and send that, but we're not going to stress about that. We're going to make the next kind of route, and that's going to be app.get, so another get route, except in this particular case, we're going to have a dynamic parameter. So you can hard-code a parameter, friend, and that's all good, or you can, and that will actually just make a new route, that will make a new route at friend, but in this case, we're going to have a dynamic parameter called friend, which means that it can vary depending on what the user sends. And we're going to go rec response. And in this particular case, so that's a parameter, so we destructure it from the parameter. So we're going to go const friend is equal to rec.param, because you can have multiple. We're also going to use queries in this particular example, so we're going to go limit is equal to request.query. And so for this particular route, what we're just going to do for the second is res.send. We're going to go status first, 200.send. And we're going to once again send a message saying you asked for, going to go backticks, you asked for a friend named, and just pass in that information. I'll just close that and move this over and pass in the friend. And what we could also do is just console log.limit to make sure that that's all working. Restart our server. And now we can make a slightly more complicated GET request and just say, okay, the friend's name is, what's a good friend's name? Martin. And we're going to add a query of limit and set that equal to 10. So let's see what that gets us. So we asked for a friend named Martin, and we'll notice that we console logged 10. And so that's just an example of how different ways you can send information. So what we're actually going to do is make a tiny bit of an application, and for that we're going to use a JSON database that you can actually, it takes 5 minutes to code yourself, and then once you've done it you can just copy the code. I actually made a video on it, the link to the video is in the description. But essentially what we're going to do is just come over here and make a new file called database functions.js, and I'm just going to copy my code directly in, and then in our server up the top, we can just require those things in. So that's read db, write db, and this is just going to give us some data persistence with a JSON file. And so that's just require./database functions. And so we're going to make a little application where we can add friends to a friends list that gets saved, and we can delete them, and we can request see how many friends we have with a particular name, and we can limit that, and that should be about everything. I'm not going to use this put route. Put is typically for updating. I'm just going to use the post, so I'm going to console that out. But we're just going to add one more route in here, app.get aloha, just to see how different routes work with dynamic versus static. So res.send, we're just going to send aloha back. Cool. So the first thing is we're going to define some requests. And so our first request is going to be, we're going to go new friend, and we want a first and last name. So Doug McHenry. Yeah, sure, that's fine. And in this particular case, what we're going to do on our server is just for every new friend, so this is actually new friend now, because that's what we are sending it as, new friend, copy that there, we're going to try and catch error, just in case. So we're going to say const char friends is equal to read db.friends, call it as a function.friends. So that's if we have a database, and we're going to then write db is going to be, we'll pass it an object with friends, and char friends is the current array, so we're going to spread that and add to it new friend. And so essentially what that's going to do is just take the current array, well actually you'll see it here, and so in this case if there's no current, if it tries this block and it can't read anything, we're just going to write to the database because it doesn't currently exist, and we're just going to go friends as an array, and that just has new friend at the start. Super simple. And we're just going to change this, so just say added your friend with that name. Cool. So let's just try that out now and see if we can restart our server and add some friends to our friends list. And so if I just run this send request, friend is not defined. Gotta change that, new friend. Restart our server, run that request. We added a friend, Doug McHenry, and then if we come over to our little database, we can see that we have two Doug McHenrys because I added it twice, which is excellent. So the next thing I'm going to do is just make some random names up. So we're going to have a James McHenry, send that request. We're going to have a Larry. We're going to have a Jennifer. We're going to have a Lucy. And we're going to have two Lucys, except this one is going to be McHenry Henry. Cool. So now if we look at our database, we've got a whole bunch of friends because we're super popular. We can close that. The next thing we're going to do is come over to our, we've got our first get root which just has a hi. We're going to make it so that our first get root returns our entire list of friends. And so in this particular case, we're just going to say friends, and we're just going to say read db function friends. And so if we just try that first route, get rid of all of that, we should get all of our friends back. And we can see that we do, so that's super cool. Now we're going to come in here and make another route, get http //localhost 9393 slash, in this particular case, we're going to ask for Lucy, and we're going to pass a limit currently is equal to 4. And so in this particular case, that's going to reach this dynamic route here. It's going to read the friend and Lucy, and we're just going to ask it to return readdb.friends. Now that's an array, and so what I'm going to do is splice it from 0 to whatever the limit was. And so in this particular case, I'm actually going to do the limit. Yeah, the limit's good. So now let's restart that server, and that's only going to return a maximum of however many friends that we have. So if we run this route, we get 4 back, and that's because the limit is working. But what we didn't do is we actually need to filter. So if we just go filter friend, open it up on a new, and return a true or false. So friends is going to be a particular name. We want a friend includes Lucy, so we're just going to go friend.includes friend. I'm going to give that one a double D just to differentiate the two. And that should filter them out so that we only get Lucy's back. So if we run that again, we only get Lucy's back. That's super cool. And now if I were to change that limit to 1, we would only get 1 Lucy back. So that's kind of just how queries and parameters work. So currently, we've done a post request, we've done get requests. The next request we're going to make is a delete. And so in this particular case, we're just going to delete http://localhost 9393, and it's going to be similar to above where we have a content type is going to be application.json, and we're going to pass enemy, and we're going to say Lucy as our new enemy. So in here, we're going to have to come and read in this route. So we're going to have to destructure the body. So enemy is equal to rec.body. Yep. And now what we're going to do is have to edit our database. So we're going to go catch error. And so if there's an error in this particular case, it's because our database doesn't exist. So we're going to rinse.status. We're just going to say 400.send, and we're going to send a message saying you have no friends. Can't lose a friend if you don't have any. If it's successful, we're going to first we're going to say const current friends is equal to readdb.friends, just as above. And now we're going to say write db, and it's going to be an object. Friends is the current friends dot filter, and so now we're going to go filter, same as above, friend, and if friend does not include, friend includes enemy, then it will stay, and we're just going to res.status.send, and in this particular we have to add success.send, and we'll just say friends list is equal to readdb.friends, because we can just read it now, it's been written just like that. And so if we check, so let's see who we currently have as our friend. So in this particular case we're going to get, got to restart our server. So we've got all of these friends, right? And we can get a particular Lucy back, that's chill. Let's say we want to delete anyone with Lucy. We can do that. So we currently have no friends. So I wonder why that's happening. Lucy is our enemy. That works. Current, that's what it is. So we have to include that there, not at the end. So now if we run that request again, we can see that we get all of the Lucy's removed from our friends list, and that's kind of how the delete method works. And so just like that, we have different routes. We've got dynamic IDs, we've got parameters, we've passed body information, we've used the different methods. Here you can just start using user authentication, and you can persist information on your server with a database like Postgres or MongoDB. But yeah, this is just a super simple introduction as to kind of how to build the basics of a server, your backend with your test.rest. You can trial it without even needing a front end. And the last one we'll just test is the Aloha route. So if we just go Aloha, send that request, we get Aloha back. So that's just a static route. You can make them as long as you want. You could go James, that route doesn't exist, so we'll get nothing back. Cannot get Aloha James. But if we came in here and added it, restarted that, run that, started now, we get Aloha back. Yeah, but that's a super simple introduction, everything you need to know about REST APIs, Node.js. Once again, to get your backend working, if you like the video, like and subscribe. I'm going to make a full stack app with MongoDB, JWT Auth, and Node.js in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, catch you guys later. Thanks for watching. Peace.